Some being that I was busy, some being that not that creative and I have a hard time coming up with ideas. But I decided this week to do a new video and fall back on an old idea, which is the segment I created a little while back called Never Judge a Book by Its Movie. And today we are going to be tackling a book I just finished reading. I think for the first time. I don't think I ever read it before because it didn't seem like I remembered much of it, but a book that spawned a movie that I have really enjoyed ever since I first saw it many years ago when I was in my early teens, actually preteens, I believe. The adaptation of Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire. So yes, I just recently finished reading the book. Actually, to be fair, listening to the book on Audible. I've been using Audible quite a bit lately. And so once I did, I decided to rewatch the movie because I hadn't seen it in a few years. And once I'd done that, I decided it'd be a good idea to do another one of these videos because I enjoyed the last one we did on Coraline. And I think it's just a fun concept. So it's probably going to be a short one because the main point of these videos is to kind of point out the similarities and differences. And seeing as this one, the screenplay was written by Anne Rice, she did a very excellent job of keeping it very faithful to both the content and the tone and spirit of the original novel. So let's just get right into Interview with the Vampire. Also, I just briefly want to say I realize I'm probably seem very low energy in this video. I'm probably talking very quietly. That's because it's very early in the morning. I just woke up and everybody else is still sleeping, so I'm trying to be respectful and be quiet. So sorry if you have a hard time hearing me. So like I was saying, the point of these videos is kind of to compare and contrast the movie from the original source material, and the original intention of these videos being to compare bad adaptations to the original good novel or source material. And in this one, we're going to have to take a little different approach because we don't really have that problem. Having the screenplay written by Anne Rice really helped keep it true to the original book. And obviously it's quite a long novel, so to get it down to feature length, she did have to do some editing and compressing and changing some things, but I think having her do it was the wise choice on the studio's part and the director's part, whoever made that decision, because the choices she made, which in some cases were fairly drastic differences, still made sense within the story and made you kind of go, okay, yeah, I see why they did that. And like we'll get into later on, there are things towards the end that are changed for various different reasons, but we'll get into that. But first of all being, and the one choice I didn't really understand, it's not that big a deal, except towards the end it would have made more sense if they'd kept it the original way. But the first thing that really jumps out at me is the movie opens in San Francisco, where the interview is taking place, where this young journalist played by Christian Slater is interviewing Brad Pitt's Louis. And in the book, the interview takes place in New Orleans, which is where Louis is from and where a lot of the backstory takes place. And with the end of the book and the end of the movie, it would have made more sense to keep it there, and we'll get to why later on. But like I say, it's just a choice I didn't really understand, but maybe it's just where they had to shoot available, I don't know. Moving past that, oh, by the way, I realize I should have said this earlier, but obviously this is a super spoilery type of thing, because we're going to be talking not only about how the movie goes and how the movie ends, but also how the book goes and how the book ends. So if you haven't seen the movie, haven't read the book, you might not want to watch this. I don't know. Maybe watching this will intrigue you to do so. I hope so, because both are excellent. Anyway, moving on. The opening of the story that he's telling is quite different, because in the book there's quite a bit of backstory leading up to when he becomes a vampire. There's a whole storyline with in the book, Louis has an entire family. He's got his mother and sisters and brothers, and one brother in particular being the focus of the opening of the book, because there's this whole story about how his brother was going to enter the priesthood, and he was convinced that God was leading him to have Louis sell their plantation in New Orleans and donate the money to the church. And this caused a big rift between them, because Louis didn't have that kind of faith, and he thought the whole thing was just utter nonsense. And so it wound up leading to his brother kind of going mad and killing himself. And that is the sort of underlying tragedy that makes Louis kind of give up on life, and why he sort of embraces Lestat's offer to turn him into a vampire when he comes for him. Whereas in the film, they just kind of briefly, in about 2 seconds, change his tragedy down to his wife 6 months earlier had died in childbirth. There's no mention of his family or his brother. They changed the tragedy over to something that they can just go, okay, this is what happened, and everybody would go, oh yeah, that sucks, that's horrible, I can see why he'd want to die. So it's a very different motivation, but it makes sense when you're trying to pare the story down for time constraints. So I get why they did that. After that, it's pretty much similar. He really wants to die. He meets Lestat. Lestat offers to, turn him into a vampire, and that whole thing happens. Then it's a little more drawn out. There's a lot more with them, like hunting the slaves on the plantation, and the slaves becoming suspicious of them, and leading to Louis burning down the plantation. In the movie, that's done very quickly, over just a few minutes, and there's a lot more to it in the book. And so it just kind of quickened the pace in the movie to just kind of explain it in a few sentences again, rather than take the 20-30 minutes it would have taken if they put everything from the book in there. But again, completely understandable changes. Let's see, consulting my notes here. And then after that, it's very, very similar to what happens in the movie. There's there's the whole thing with them moving out of the plantation into New Orleans, and just kind of embracing the vampire lifestyle, and Louis eventually coming across Claudia, and that kind of happens a lot more quickly in the movie, in like a one night thing where he finds Claudia, bites her, Lestat brings her to their place and changes her, whereas in the book I think it happens over a couple of days. But again, not a big difference. So that all stays pretty much the same right up until Claudia becoming resentful of Lestat and Louis, because she can't age and she'll never be a full-grown woman. She'll always be trapped in the body of a child. That is one fairly big difference, and I realized that was more of a finding the right actress and finding an actress at the age that she could actually act and have the depth of character that they needed. But in the book, Claudia is like 5 years old when they change her, so she really is just like a tiny little child for the rest of eternity. Whereas in the book, or in the movie, I believe Kirsten Dunst was like 8 or 9, almost 10 when they filmed it. So it's a little bit of a difference, but I mean, completely understandable. You can't really expect a 5-year-old actress to have the kind of range they needed for that character as she grows older in her mind and as a person without getting any bigger. But, which, by the way, Kirsten Dunst at that age did an amazing job. Jamie and I were talking about that as we were watching it, just how at that age she could have that range and that believability. But so that stays all pretty much the same through, her coming to hate Lestat and planning his death and all that stuff, and killing him and leaving him for dead, and him coming back as they're planning to leave for Europe, and they once again think that they kill him. That's all pretty much exactly what happens in the book. From there's a little bit of a difference, again, with the time constraint thing, and the book being more drawn out. They kind of, in the film, just in voiceover narration and a few little montage sequences, show, and he talks about how they went from village to village in Germany and Eastern Europe and all these places, hoping to find vampires and never finding any. Well, there's actually a rather lengthy segment in the book where they find this little village somewhere in Eastern Europe, somewhere around like Carpathia or Transylvania, somewhere like that, where there have been vampire attacks, and they go out searching for the vampire that did it, and they find this vampire that's just basically a mindless monster, almost like a zombie vampire, because he was just turned and left to his own devices and never taught how to hunt or anything, and so he's just kind of devolved into this just wordless, drooling monster, and so that's quite a bit different. And then from there, the movie picks up, because they skip over that part and go to where they're in Paris, and that all is very, very similar. Everything pretty much stays the same, where they meet the vampires from the theater, and Louis becomes interested in Armand and kind of wanting to stay with him, and Claudia sees that coming and freaks out on him and becomes resentful because she thinks he's going to leave her, and then she finds this woman, Madeline, who's lost her daughter and wants Louis to change her into a vampire so Madeline can have a little girl to take care of, and Claudia can have someone to take care of her when Louis leaves her, as she thinks he's going to do. And there's a bit of a change there, again, for time constraints. In the movie, they turn Madeline, and they've got some time with her. They have a few weeks, I believe, and they have this plot where Madeline wants to go burn down the old doll shop that she owns, because she had designed all the dolls to look like her daughter who had died, and she didn't want to have that connection to her old life anymore, and she was sort of this really kind of vicious vampire and very dark, and there's quite a bit of time with that whole storyline, whereas in the movie there's none of that. I mean, they jump straight from she's still in the process of becoming a vampire. She's still laying on the floor of their hotel room, just recovering from her body dying, and the vampires break in and kidnap them and take them to the theater to kill Claudia and Madeline and wall Louis up in a coffin in a wall somewhere in the theater. And so that was a big difference. The biggest difference in this part, and it's a huge difference actually, and I get why she changed this particular bit because the ending of the movie has more of an impact with this change. But in the book, when the vampires come up with this plot to kill Claudia and Madeline and trap Louis, they're actually being helped by Lestat. Lestat shows up and tells them what they had done, that they had attacked him and pretty much left him for dead. And so he's there at the theater, and Louis sees him, and they talk, and he's trying to get Lestat to explain, that he was horrible to them and that he deserved what happened to him, and he just kind of stands around smirking. Whereas he does not, he's not there at all in the movie. At this point, you are assuming Lestat is dead, and you're not shown anything different at that point. And so, and honestly, I think it's better the way she did it in the movie, because, again, him showing up later on has more of an impact, and also with Lestat showing up at the theater, the theater vampires' motivation to kill Claudia kind of doesn't make any sense anymore, because they can see Lestat's alive. He's there talking to them. So they obviously didn't kill him. So they have no reason to seek justice against Claudia for killing him. So the movie version, I think, makes more sense. And then, and so that's a very big difference. And then moving on from there, it's pretty much the same, right up until you get to where Louis is now just kind of capping off his story with the interviewer and telling him that he came back to America eventually, and he kind of watched the country change and grow up. That's all very similar. One thing that I love that she changed in the script for the movie is she added this bit of monologue, a bit of a speech that's not in the book, that's in the movie, that I absolutely love, where he talks about how with the invention of movies on the big screen in theaters, he was able to see the sun rise again. And it's this very beautiful little bit about how at first it was in silvers with the black and white films, and then as time progressed, he was able to see the magnificent oranges and blues that he missed so much of the sunrise. And I really think that was probably just like a missed opportunity thing when she was writing the script. She was like, "Oh, I should have put this in the book, so I'm gonna put it in the movie," because it's really a great moment. It's one of my favorite parts of the movie, honestly, ever since I was a kid. And then there's a bit of difference where when he finds Lestat in the graveyard, in the mausoleum, and he's all emaciated and just looks like a corpse. In the book, he actually has a young vampire with him. Lestat does, who's like his new would-be Louis. But it's very obvious that this young guy's not buying it. He's already sick of Lestat. And Lestat is refusing to, go out. He's closed himself off in this mausoleum, and is basically using this young vampire to, go get him food and tell him what's going on out there, and the guy's just like, screw this, And that's not when in the movie it's just Lestat there when Louis comes to find him, and I think that's a better choice. It makes more of an impact when the scene's just between the two of them. And then so we're pretty much to the end, and big difference, and I like I say, I understand why she changed it, because it makes more of an impact. Is in the book, the interviewer and Louis have their little confrontation where he's asking Louis to change him, and he's telling him, no, clearly you didn't understand what I was trying to tell you, if that's what you think, if you think this is a good idea. And he attacks him. In the movie, he just kind of slams him against the ceiling and yells at him, whereas in the book he actually bites him and drains a little bit of his blood, but he doesn't turn him. He passes out and wakes up later, and Louis is gone. And in the book, he goes out and gets in his car, and he puts in one of the tapes, the last tape from the interview, to find out where Louis had said he had found Lestat in the graveyard, because he's going to go find Lestat now and interview him. Whereas in the movie, the big change that she made was the kid freaks out, he runs out, gets in his car, he's driving down the road listening to the first tape, listening to the story again, and Lestat's in the kid's back seat and jumps out and attacks him and bites him and tells him he's going to give him the choice to become a vampire. So, and that's the end of the movie. So there, like I say, there are a few differences, and like I was saying earlier, the reason I don't really like or understand the change of location for where the movie takes place in San Francisco is because in the book it makes more sense that they be conducting the interview in New Orleans, because he says, just a few blocks from here I found Lestat on blah 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 street, and the kid goes to look for him. And it would have made even more sense in the movie to keep it in New Orleans, because the way they're telling this story, if Lestat or Louis had seen Lestat in New Orleans hiding out in his crypt, and now they're having the interview in San Francisco, but when he leaves, Lestat's in the back of his car, like he followed him all the way from New Orleans and waited till this interview was over to do something. It would make more sense if Lestat was just, blocks and blocks away. But anyway, I don't know. So yeah, that's Interview with the Vampire, and like I say, this is a much different thing than our last video with Coraline, because that was talking about how the movie was such a huge disappointment because of the differences, whereas this one I honestly think was just as good, if not a little bit better, with the changes made. Again, like I say, a lot of the changes were just for timing purposes, for getting it down to feature length, but some of the choices that she made to change were things that I honestly feel made more sense and were better choices. So this is actually a thumbs up. Don't judge a book by its movie. Whereas they're just two slightly different beasts. One's not really way better, one's not really way worse. They're just a little bit different, but it's a very, very faithful adaptation. I'm very, very positive on how the movie turned out, and that doesn't happen very often. Usually you take a book and turn it into a movie and you lose a lot of what made the book great, and that's not the case in this particular instance. So definitely thumbs up on Interview with the Vampire. Like, I knew that already. I've loved that movie since I was a kid, but now having finally read the book in its entirety, I'm definitely an even bigger fan of the movie because it was so faithful. So anyway, that's it for this one, and I'm probably going to be doing another one here pretty shortly, because I'm kind of doing the same thing right now with Hearts in Atlantis. I'm in the middle of again listening to that on Audible, and when I finish it, I'm going to rewatch the movie and probably do another one of these videos. So if I don't do anything else in the meantime on this channel, I will see you then. Stay nerdy, guys, and definitely, if you haven't seen or read Interview with the Vampire, go do both, because they're both great options. Great book, great movie, and pretty soon I'm going to be listening to Vampire Lestat and Queen of the Damned, so I'll probably do one of these for Queen of the Damned. Definitely not going to be quite so positive. I already know that, because although I do like the movie and some things about it, I know that it's not going to even come close to being as good as the book. So yeah, that's going to be a much different video. So stay nerdy, guys, and I will see you later.